Hello, SpongicX here with my thoughts on Season 3, the final season of Hulu's Animaniacs reboot. While it wasn't as good as the original series, I actually defended the first two seasons of the Animaniacs reboot, despite how not everyone was on board with it. But honestly, I drew the line at Season 3. Season 3 was overall the weakest of the whole series, and it left me very disappointed at the end. I've heard a lot of people complain about the reboot over a number of things, like how the characters don't sound the same like they used to, the way it relies too much on political humor, they miss the old characters, or they're just sick of Dot being a whiny feminazi all of a sudden. She's very out of character compared to the original series, and so I was hoping the show would surprise us by limiting itself at first during the first two seasons and then maybe get a little more loose further down the line, but unfortunately, Season 3 was announced to be their last season. It sounds like the writers wanted to do more, but Hulu decided to end it short, and so, and you think they would have tried, like, having it go out with a bang, and no, this had, like, a very depressing ending, and so overall, this was the most boring and unfunniest out of the seasons of the reboot. Like, this was the worst the series has been. Only 10 new episodes with 22 minutes each, and most of them are very forgettable. Like, normally, I like to go through each episode and say what I thought of it, but it's just so bad that I don't even want to talk about these episodes. Too much of it was wasted on repetitive Pinky and the Brain skits you feel like you've seen done already, and three of the skits were wasted on Starbucks and Cindy, one of the new skits from the reboot that I honestly hated them in the first two seasons, but at least in the first two seasons you only had one skit of them per season. Here they had three skits of it throughout the season, and one of them was even placed right in the middle of like what could have been like a full part episode, but they had to divide it off and interrupt it with like Starbucks and Cindy. Honestly, I ended up skipping the Starbucks and Cindy skits. Every time they came on, I just fast forwarded. I did not want to watch it. That's how bad those skits are. It's like I feel like once you've seen them all. Even Pinky and the Brain has more variety in this, and you could argue they're almost like the same thing every time. Speaking of which, I mentioned how I'm not the biggest Pinky and the Brain fan, although some of their skits are pretty funny. But I thought like in season one, I would have rather they had Pinky and the Brain be their own series, just like in the original spinoff. I felt like this should have just been a show that focused on the Warners and have Pinky and the Brain maybe have their own show instead of having it interfere. But so I felt like season one, it had a few good Pinky and the Brain skits, but most of them were forgettable. I thought season two actually reversed it. I thought the season two Pinky and the Brain skits were actually really good. They were a good comeback. Some of the most creative I've seen in the series. And unfortunately, season three went back to being some of the most uninspired versions of them I've seen. And yeah, I don't know. Just was not a fan of them this time. So, there were only like two skits out of these 10 episodes that I found passable, for say. And, so the first episode, about like the first episode, the first skit and the final skit were okay, I guess. But, and then there was also an episode that I'd say was the highlight of the season. That was an episode that felt like a parody to Super Smash Brothers. I'll get to that later, but, and then there is a certain cameo at the end of the final episode that was welcoming to see, but I'll get more on that later. Otherwise, just that cameo alone wasn't enough to save the episode, unfortunately, but otherwise, those are the only good things I really have to say about this season. The rest was unfunny garbage. I can at least say season 1 and 2 at least had like some moments that had me burst out laughing. I don't recall laughing hard at all during this season. I was rolling my eyes and even tossing my head back during a lot of scenes, and this was just the show at its worst. Now, the first episode takes place after the events of the season 2 finale, where Ralph is now the head of Warner Brothers and Nora becomes a new security guard for the Warner's movie lot, and she proves to be a far more capable guard than Ralph, so causing the Warners to feel outmatched and trying to get them to get Nora her old job back so they can go back to the way things were. Now, honestly, I thought Nora worked better as a villainous security guard. I mentioned how I thought Nora was a very boring CEO character. She just wasn't a good replacement for Mr. Plotz from the original show. And so I kind of liked this change up. And too bad the episode's ending had to reset the status quo and give her old job back, along with giving Ralph the security job back. So it's like, That was kind of lame, but part of me felt like maybe this episode would have worked better as the series finale instead of the series opener, but yeah, especially after seeing how this ends, I would have much rather preferred this be the way the show ended. But so, also, I think the turn of events of this episode was kind of misleading. I don't know, because I remember there were rumors that not rumors, but like flat out confirmation. The writer said that if the show got renewed for a third season, there would be more characters from the original show brought back, and that was a lie. There were a few cameos here, but honestly, they're about as much as you would have gotten in like season one. I'll even argue season one had more cameos because you actually saw more characters on screen at once compared to this reboot. But so, anyways, I was hoping that somehow Ralph's job as the I was hoping Ralph's new job as the new CEO would somehow lead to him bringing back the old cast to get their jobs back or something. I don't know. You know, it was just hopeful thinking. And nope, we didn't even get a chance for any of that to happen. And so, otherwise, Dr. Scratch and Sniff does appear in more episodes this time around, where he only had like one or two small cameos in the first two seasons, so he was more of a reoccurring character this time at least, but it just doesn't make up for the absence of the other characters. Meanwhile, the Good Feathers do make a very minor background cameo in the Super Smash Bros. Episode. There is a Christmas special, and there is one point where both Hello Nurse and Minerva Mink get a very brief name drop and even a picture cameo. Basically, just a bad joke mentioning how they haven't heard from them in forever, and so it's like, oh, ha ha for the fans who wanted them back. But so the best cameo was towards the end of the last episode, where Sherry Stoner reprised her role as Slappy Squirrel. And basically, we see a bunch of fans demanding for her to show up, and so she finally pops out of her tree just to angrily shout at her fans that she's retired, and she's wondering why they want her back so much. And so then, of course, the audience starts cheering. They're like, "She hasn't changed a bit," and I'll admit that was pretty funny, but wasn't enough to save this season, unfortunately. And personally, I felt like the ending of the show should have ended at that cameo right there, but unfortunately it had to go on even after that, and what follows was even worse. And, oh my god, like, the series finale was insulting, and I'll get to that later. But also, during the final episode, we do get a very brief cameo from the character Mr. Director in his clown makeup from the clown episode from the original series. I even think it was his original voice as well, but it just wasn't enough. If people thought the jokes and references from Animaniacs Reboot Season 1 and 2 were dated, oh, they're even worse in Season 3. I mean, Episode 2, they tried making an episode spoofing off of JoJo Siwa, or whatever the hell her name was, and I'll bet most viewers watching Animaniacs have no idea who the hell she even is, and she hasn't even been relevant in, 5 years, so why did they think they needed to make an episode that tried pandering to her crowd or something? I don't know. It was really stupid. And on the bright side, we didn't have a single Donald Trump joke this time, but there was a really weird occurrence where in one of the Pinky and the Brain episodes, Hillary Clinton was the president there, and yeah, it just felt like one of the writers was a diehard Hillary Clinton fan. They were so pissed off that she didn't become president, so they said, screw it, I'm going to write the episode I would have wrote if she was president. It's just the impression I got. There was just no... it's like, why wasn't it Joe Biden? Or, why was it Hillary Clinton all of a sudden? It's so weird. So, yeah, it's great that they finally got rid of Donald Trump references, but a lot of the references they had to make up for it were honestly worse. So, aside from the first episode, the only episode to keep me mostly entertained was the Smash Brothers parody episode, where the Warners get sucked into a video game parody of Super Smash Brothers, and the episode had an entirely different art style throughout most of the episode, where it's a CG animated episode made to strongly resemble the graphics of Super Smash Brothers. And the Warners looked pretty cool with their CG designs, and it was kind of fun to see them have like a move set that you would see in a game like Smash Brothers. And I don't know, it was just a fun little escape. The animation was honestly better to look at than the actual Reboot's animation, which... yeah, the Reboot's animation just felt too rigged. It just felt too stiff, and so the computer animation was more fluid and felt more suitable for the zany antics of the characters. And part of me kind of wishes the show was CG. If I knew it could have looked more fluid in this style compared to the stiff style we got in the Reboot. But The final episode was a huge insult. The characters go to a theme park and everyone gets stuck to Wacko's lollipop. They ride a teacup ride and somehow cause the world to explode. Meanwhile, Slappy appears to make her only speaking cameo in this entire reboot. Finally, the show ends with the characters dying from a meteor strike. I'm not kidding, that's how the series ends. How did we go from Wacko's Wish to this? I'm sorry, this finale sucked. Maybe if the show just ended with the Slappy Squirrel cameo, the ending would have sucked less. It still would have been underwhelming, but at least it would have had something to make some of the old fans smile. It would have been a bittersweet ending, but this ending was just depressing. It did not make me laugh. It just made me feel like, it just kind of sighed like, well, it's over. That's how they ended it. And yeah, that's not really how I wanted to see the series end. Seeing the main characters getting struck by a ball of fire and dying. That's just depressing. I really hated this season. It's enough for me to even want to say the entire reboot itself was bad. No, I'm not just judging this just by the finale alone. I'm judging it by the season overall. Like, yeah, that ending did not help the matter, but it doesn't change the fact that most of the season I was bored throughout most of it. And yeah, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to pretend season 1 and 2 didn't have their boring episodes either, but they had enough to keep me entertained throughout. And I cannot say the same for season 3. This just felt very uninspired. Heck, I was even rewatching the original Animaniacs like a few weeks ago, and I'm not going to pretend it was perfect either, but it was a much superior show. It had more than just witty jokes about politics and celebrities. It had energy, passion, color, wacky animation, lightning fast dialogue, and a lot of jokes that would go over adults' heads, or kids' heads, I mean, and, stuff that actually had me burst out laughing. It's like, oh, you'll never see stuff like that on TV nowadays, and it's the stuff that just gave me a good smile and laugh, and it's like when they try being edgy on this show, it just doesn't work. It feels like stuff that every other show does. The humor in Animaniacs originally felt very unique to its show, and now it feels like they're just doing what others have done. But it's missing that passion, energy, wit, and zany, fast-paced humor it used to have. All that is absent in this reboot, and especially in Season 3. Heck, the original show was more than just a comedy. It even had some drama and emotion, as seen in skits like Rita and Runt. And back then, I honestly didn't care for the other characters that much, but this reboot made me realize I actually do miss a lot of these old characters. It made me realize they did add variety to the show. And it gave more for the Warners to interact with. I love the ensemble episodes where the Warners actually interacted with these other characters that we rarely see on screen together. And it made moments like those were what made certain episodes special. And I feel like this reboot didn't have episodes that had special moments like that. It's like, yeah, you can try like stunning the audience by making an episode that it's a tribute to a game like Super Smash Bros. Yeah, visually it's amazing. Otherwise, substance-wise, the episode itself wasn't that great. It's like you're probably amazed just by like the change of animation that it referenced an old game. Aside from that, it wasn't that great of an episode. So, although it was the highlight of the season, it wasn't that great. It wasn't enough to make up for everything. And I was real hopeful the Animaniacs reboot would at least get better and go out with a bang. And, oh, it literally went out with a bang, but it left me with a huge whimper in the process. This finale season was just terrible, and the series deserved to go out better than this. 4 out of 10. Man, it really saddens me to see this show go so downhill. It was so promising. I remember tuning into the reboot, and I loved it when I first saw the episode premiere, and I remember like doing my reviews on it and saying, while it wasn't perfect, I still enjoyed it. I thought Season 2 was the best of the reboot series, but Season 3 was arguably the worst. I hated it. It was just depressing. I did not care for it at all. I wish I could wish luck for the Tiny Toons reboot, but considering how it's going to be an HBO Max exclusive, and it's going to have some really stupid decisions like having Buster and Babs Bunny no longer being a couple, they're now related, they're now brothers and sisters, that's just a total big ew move. They flat out made out in a few episodes of the old series. They were dating. This is just a really gross and stupid decision. Ugh. I hate political culture. They ruin everything. Well, that's all I have to show for now. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Have a great day.